those in this area who raise poultry. I'm joined today by Jim Sakaris, Ohio Poultry Association, Brian Baldridge, Director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and Dr. Summers, who is the state veterinarian. We have obviously been following this, particularly through the Department of Agriculture, for some time. The farmers who raise poultry in this part of the state, and this is the center for the state of Ohio for production of eggs, production of poultry, have really suffered some tremendous losses. We estimate, I guess it's not much of an estimate, it's a pretty accurate number, that about 15.5 million birds have had to be destroyed. So that's a massive loss. Brian, I don't know if it's the biggest in the country, but when I met with the Secretary of Agriculture when I was in Washington a little over a week ago, we had a number of governors there, and Ohio was much higher than any of the states, at least, that was represented by those governors. So this is continuing to be an ongoing problem. We looked at a lot of different discussions about a lot of different things. My purpose in being here today it's been my experience that I learn more when I'm talking directly to the people involved. I've had some phone conversations prior to today, but we tried to get everybody in the room and just really talked about this situation. I think one of the things that is clear is the federal government is really going to have to accelerate the research that is being done in regard to bird flu. This has ramifications potentially not only for the farmers in the western part of the state of Ohio and other states who raise poultry, but also we have other, obviously, bigger ramifications in regard to bird flu. So the federal government is going to have to become much more active in regard to the research, and I think that one of the messages that I heard today was, please do everything you can to speed that up. So I will be calling the Secretary of Agriculture tomorrow, and I'll report back in regard to that conversation. Let me see if anybody else, Brian, anything else you want to say here, and then we'll get some questions. Sure,
and thank you, Governor. And as was mentioned, about 15.5 million birds have been depopulated since Christmas Eve of 2024. So it's a tremendous impact to our poultry industry. We work collaboratively from the Ohio Department of Agriculture with USDA and the Ohio Poultry Association, those producers, those farmers in your local area here that are so heavily impacted. So we're just a resource for them. We continue to be. The governor's been heavily engaged. We've been working with other agencies at the state level to make sure we're giving full support to the local community. Jim, anything else from the Poultry Association?
Obviously this is difficult for the farms that are involved. No one wants to go through this, but the farms are prepared, they're resilient, they will survive. We thank our partners both at the state, federal, the Department of Agriculture, and our local officials for working with us to get through this, and the local community for their support. We know that everyone is affected by this, and we will get beyond it.
Dr. Summers, anything?
Thank you, Governor. Just wanted to echo Jim's comments there. Our working relationship with the Ohio Poultry Association, our poultry industry, is as strong as any other one in the country, and I do stand behind that. I think we've got a really good thing going on here in Ohio with our poultry industry. One thing that we definitely want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on is an effective way to use a vaccination strategy for poultry, for HPAI. So that's one thing that we're going to be continuing to watch, and hopefully we have that as a tool in the toolbox here for Ohio. Thank you, sir.
I would just say that, the impact, of course, is not just with those farmers. Obviously, it's the people who work there. It may be other people electricians and other people who keep the farm going and the whole big production going. So this obviously has a significant impact. There's also a significant impact, of course, in regard to the production of eggs. So more than happy to take questions. Why don't we start with questions about this topic first, and then we can move on to other topics.
In terms of vaccination or antibiotics, how do we effectively get that into the bird population without affecting human population?
Yeah, well, I'll let the doctor answer that question.
So USDA is going to work on. There's some research that's going to be conducted on trying to find an effective vaccine that can be used for our domesticated poultry. There isn't a lot of information yet on how we would implement that or what type of vaccine that would be, but that is something that USDA is going to continue to work on, so we know that it's safe and effective, and it provides that immunity that we're looking for in our poultry flocks.
Now, let's just add one other thing. I mean, I guess to state the obvious, but these farmers are doing everything that they can do, and they're doing exactly what they're being told to do. This is a federal government sets the criteria, sets the protocol. We are following that. We are following that protocol, and these farmers know exactly what to do and how to follow that protocol. So, this relies, frankly, it relies on the individuals, the farmers, all those who are involved in doing the right thing, and they certainly have been doing that.
Out of the 15.5 million birds that have been destroyed, does that mean 15.5 million were actually infected, or were they affected?
No, does not mean that. But what it means is, based upon the federal protocol, how the close proximity, when the sampling was done, when you got a hit, what I would call a hit, when you got a positive, then certain things have to happen in a certain distance and a certain area. So the other thing that's been pointed out, however, this is very contagious. And I asked the question today, if you did nothing, if you didn't do any of the depopulation, what would happen? And doctor tells me the fatality rate is very, very, very high, right? You could be as high as 90, 95, or even 100%. So those birds are going to basically die anyway. The point is you're trying to either slow this thing down, or obviously the main goal is to stop it. So
that number of birds, that's more than just chickens. That includes quail and turkey and others, poultry.
I can't do the breakout.
Yeah. So mainly it's our layers. We have one duck production facility. So yes, just one of those. But our layer facilities were the main ones that were hit. And turkeys as well, absolutely. And to put it in perspective, as far as the layer facilities, about over 30% of our layer birds here in Ohio have been depopulated. And those are the ones that are laying the eggs each and every day.
So you kind of, that's a huge amount. That's massive. So.
In terms of federal research and federal aid, do you have any consideration of declaring a state emergency to get quicker relief or anything like that? I know the government
Look, I mean, one of the things that the federal government has done is up the amount of compensation. One of the things I'll take up with the Secretary is to see whether or not that could be backdated, basically, retroactive, because some of these farmers obviously occurred before the date that went into effect. As far as the research, this has to be federal research. It has to be federally funded or funded by the companies, the pharmaceutical companies. But in most cases, I think you would have the federal government being actively involved. And I think what we need, frankly, is just a real sense of urgency, and that will be my message when I talk to the Secretary.
And as far as, do you have any idea of what this impact will be on the state economy? As far as, any idea where it'll have the effect on the ag cash receipts or anything?
I don't have any numbers on it. No.
We're still kind of in the middle of this outbreak.
Yeah.
How much is it for eggs staying within Ohio versus being sent out of Ohio?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
For our farmers, how much of the product they create?
Oh, normally goes out?
Yeah.
In terms of where the eggs that are normally produced in Ohio go, it's all over the country and multiple provinces in Canada, Mexico, across the world. So the first place that's obviously easiest to go is in the state, but there are so many different distribution centers, that type of thing. To put it in perspective, it takes about one commercial laying hen to feed one person a year. So we have 40 plus in a normal year million laying hens, so that means we send a lot of eggs outside of Ohio.
Okay, any last questions on the poultry situation?
Yeah, just one more. Can you speak to how many sites you're still seeing, active infections?
We're seeing active, we're seeing it slow down. Doctor, you want to take that?
Yeah, so we have a public-facing website that Department of Agriculture shows where we are, and you can track it on USDA's website. But currently, we're at 73 premises that have had an impact across Ohio. And yes, we are seeing the detection rates slow and fall. They are not necessarily gone, but we are seeing this slow down a bit. So thank you, sir.
Governor, if you'll allow one more question about the poultry. This
Sure.
would be for the Poultry Association. We've been talking a lot with grocery shoppers about the hike in prices of eggs. Can we expect what timeline can we expect for that stuff to return to normal?
We all sympathize with the price of eggs, and egg farmers are going to tell you they want the price to come down as well, because we all want there to be our quality protein on every plate. The challenge that we have is it's all supply and demand. And so when we are decreasing as we have the supply and the demand has remained the same, it's very difficult for that to happen until we get back in production. So our farmers are working every day to get those barns cleaned and disinfected so they can repopulate and start producing eggs again. That takes time. It takes that chick 21 days to hatch. It takes 18 weeks before that hen is going to start laying eggs again. So it just takes time to repopulate the facilities.
Sure. You can start, Jim.
Jim Chakeres, Chakeres, the Ohio Poultry Association.
Doctor?
Dr. Dennis Summers, SUMMERS, State Veterinarian, Ohio Department of Agriculture.
Brian Baldridge, BrianBaldridge, and I am the Director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture.
I'm Mike DeWine, DEWINE. Other questions? Okay. Anybody? We're good?
Outside.
Yeah, sure. Anything.
Can you respond at all to the federal layoffs that we're seeing and Ohio's response, maybe at the federal facilities, right, Pat, the VA hospitals?
Well, look, we're looking at this just as everybody else is. I mean, these are layoffs that's going across the country, obviously with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, our VA centers. We're certainly taking a look at that, and it is occurring, and it's occurring across the country.
Have you been in contact with any of the local sheriffs in Mercer and Darke about the heavy drone sightings recently? I don't know if
Well, sure. We actually talked about that. We talked about that today. There's a much bigger problem with drones, and the federal government is going to have to address it because we do not, even in law enforcement, have the ability to do what we need to do with drones that might be in a potentially dangerous place. We in the state government deal with drones all the time because they are flying over our prisons, and that has been used as one way to get drugs into prison. The drone goes through and makes a drop. Now, we have pretty good control over it. We now can detect those. We have the equipment to detect those in our prisons. So we know when it's coming, and when the drone is around, frankly, we have to just lock our prison down in a sense. No one goes out on the yard until we can retrieve or see if there's actually drugs that have been dropped. So federal government, the technology of the drones, the advancement of drones, this is something that Congress has to take up. And this would be a good opportunity for Congress to hold hearings and look at this from a security point of view. Now, what's going on, in Western Ohio with those drones? I don't know any more than you do. I hear the same things. I talk to the sheriff, and I've talked to, some of the producers who are here who have talked about, all the drone sightings that they have seen.
Are there any fears with layoffs and deportations that our economies will take a bigger hit, especially our more rural economies?
So the first part of your question was what? Say it again.
Are there any fears the economy will take a hit due to deportations and layoffs?
Well, look, I think in regard to the tariffs, I guess what we all hope is that the president will be able to use the threat of the tariffs and maybe the imposition of the tariffs to get better deal in negotiations with different foreign countries. I mean, I think that would be the ultimate goal that we would certainly hope to see. and to have more fair trading back and forth. So we certainly would hope that would be the goal. But time time will have to tell. We don't know. Anybody else?
We've heard reports about the president wanting to rescind the TPS for Ukrainian refugees here. What would that mean for Ukrainian refugees here in Ohio and, historically Ohio?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I mean, we all would hope that the war would end and that people that want to go back home will be able to go back home. Most people that, from Ukraine who have come here recently, want to go back home. So we would hope that that's what happens. I have, been. Well, let's look at it this way. I think one of the big successes so far of the Trump administration has been our border. Certainly, always more work to do. But if you look at the border crossings, those are down dramatically, and part of that is simply signaling to people, this is not a good idea to come across this border. And so the president not only taking action, but using the bully pulpit of the presidency to send that signal. So, what in the long run, what we hope is that we get control of the southern border and we continue to hold control of the southern border. I think once that happens, then we can have a better discussion in this country about what we should be doing in regard to legal immigration. And we've not had any kind of real significant discussion about legal immigration for decades. And the reason we haven't is because we haven't been able to deal with the illegal immigration problem. So if you can get control of the southern border, then we can look at what is in the best interest of the United States. Who do we want to come in? This has always been a very compassionate country. This has been a country where we've let people in, whether it's the Hungarians who were fleeing in the 56 revolution, or whether it was Cuba as I was growing up. So we've always been a very compassionate country. But what has stopped us and has made it so very, very difficult, I think, is the fact that we have not been able to control that southern border. And if you continue to bleed and you continue to see a problem, then it's hard to get anybody's attention or anybody who wants to focus at all on the legal challenge. So I think the Trump administration has made significant strides in the last 30 or so days since they took office in regard to that. So ultimately, I hope that we get to the point where we can have a good discussion about who should be in this country. Look, I've been very clear, something that we've watched very, very closely here is in Springfield. And all I can do is tell you what the businessmen and women who have hired Haitians there have said. And what they've said is we hired them because, number one, we couldn't find other people to work. They were here legally, so we could hire them. And despite cultural challenges and language challenges, they show up for work. They're good workers. And if they were not here tomorrow, we don't know how we'd keep this line running. We don't know how we would, be able to be at full capacity. And so if you took those, if the question is if you took those Haitians away, immediately overnight, I will tell you the business people there will tell you that's going to be a big problem for the economy of the community. Anybody else? Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Governor. Thank you, sir.
See you again.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right.